Hi there, boys and girls, and everybody outside and in between. Welcome to the Month in Review. We are going to be taking a look at everything that I watched, read, and played throughout July of 2021, along with some small thoughts, quick reviews, and ratings. Let's get started. Starting with all of my reading time this month got dominated by one thing and one thing alone, and that is Claymore by Norihiro Yagi. Claymore is a Shonen Jump advanced manga series. It is about these warriors who go around the country and fight demons. The reason that these warriors can do it is because they're actually half demons themselves, and it can be difficult for them to, maintain that demon side of them and not fully lose their human consciousness. We follow Claire and her journey. There's a lot to like about this series. Great action, great character moments and development, a lot of unique characters that you meet throughout the story. I think it's really, really good. On Goodreads, I was keeping track as I read this, and every volume of this, and there's 27 volumes in all, every volume got either 4 or 5 stars, except for one volume got a 3, but that's the one outlier. Everything else, 4 or 5 easily. I would definitely recommend this if you have any interest in manga, if you're just getting started in manga and you're not sure where to go, if you know that you like action, if you know that you like very powerful characters fighting each other, if you know that you like characters with unique abilities, this is definitely a great series to try. So that is Claymore. Now, on to... These are the things that I watched during the month of July. There's some TV, some anime, some movies. These are listed only in order of when they were watched. So it's beginning of the month to the end of the month. Starting with Record of Ragnarok. This is an anime series. Basically the story is every 1,000 years, I think, the gods all convene and they decide whether or not humanity gets to continue to exist. And this year they got together and they basically decided, nah, we're done with it. We're good. So they're going to just destroy all of humanity. Until one Valkyrie comes up and she says, hey, what about Ragnarok instead? So there's going to be this series of fights between strong gods and the strongest of humans, just to see if humans earn the right to continue existing. It doesn't sound like a very fair fight, and not to spoil things, but it's not a fair fight. On premise alone, this sounded like something I would be interested in. Big fan of combat and battle anime, big fan of different mythologies, and this sounded like it would explore a lot of different mythos, and also a lot of history gets introduced through various historical figures who were significant in their eras. This is so boring. This is so much more boring than it has any right to be. There is so much more talk about how these characters can fight than there is the characters fighting. It gets dull and stale really quickly. I did finish the season, but that's not to say it doesn't have problems. When and if the second season comes out, I will try it. I can't make any promises about sticking through it the whole way. So Record of Ragnarok gets a 4 out of 10 from me, slightly below average. It's boring. Great concept, great potential, boring. Next is Carol and Tuesday. This was a delightful anime. Another, I'm fairly certain, Netflix exclusive, where these two girls on Mars find each other and start making music together, and through their journey they become best friends, and it's just such a nice slice of life style anime with great characters. The music is really nice. It covers a lot of genres, and it's just delightful. It really is. It gets a 9 out of 10 from me. I strongly recommend it. I think it is a great, great watch. Next, we have Wolf of Wall Street I know this was incredibly popular when it came out, and it took me a while to finally get around to it, but I did. And it's great. It really is. It's a great movie. I think Leonardo DiCaprio gives an amazing performance. So does Margot Robbie. So does Jonah Hill. Everyone involved, really. There's too many for me to list everybody, but all the performers did wonderful. I think it's incredibly well written. I think it is informative for what it wanted to teach the audience. This is a biopic based on real life person Jordan Belfort and how he basically went from a small time stockbroker trying to make ends meet to this big, larger than life character. He was a bad boy who broke all the rules. No, he's a criminal who swindled people out of a lot of money. But like I said, very entertaining movie. It's on the long side. I think it's just shy of 3 hours. It might be like exactly 3 hours. So if you can find the time to watch it, and if you haven't seen it yet, I would recommend it. It's really entertaining. 9 out of 10 from me. Next is Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This movie is hilarious. This is one of the funniest movies that I have seen so far this year. Absolutely loved it. This U.S. general concocts this plan where, regardless of what happens, as soon as this plan goes into action, nuclear war between USA and Russia. And you can see people struggling and trying to come up with a way to avoid this from happening, but there's nothing they can do. It's like, well, war's gonna happen. This general did this one thing, and now, regardless of what we do, can't stop nuclear war from happening. And I know that doesn't sound like the premise to a comedy, but this is one of the funniest movies I have seen. This was so good. It's a classic for a reason. Once you see it, you'll understand. This is another 9 out of 10 from me. So good. Definitely recommend. Next, we have Silence. This is a movie about Catholic missionaries going to Japan during the time when Christianity was illegal in Japan. People would be punished and tortured and killed if they were Christian, if they wouldn't convert from that religion. They're trying to find the priest who taught them and brought them up in the religion, because he went to Japan and fell out of contact with them. On the way, they find other Japanese Christians, do what they can to help them with their faith. I can definitely see where, if you are Christian, or if you are very strong in your convictions, in your faith, in your religion, whatever it is, I can definitely see how this film would speak to you. It's definitely a very well made. It's Martin Scorsese, so you know it's going to be well made. It's very good, but it overall ranked for me as just a bit above average. For me, Silence is a 7 out of 10. So overall, I would recommend it, but it's not for everybody. Next, we have RoboCop, the original RoboCop. I know, this is another one where it's taken me a while to finally see it. It is good. It's really good. They were making a statement about how overtly violent movies had become, and they wanted to make a film about that, and I think they succeeded. I think they succeeded in making something entertaining, as well as making the statement that they wanted to make. It's definitely earned its classic status, and even if you're not someone who generally likes movies from that era, I think you would be able to find enjoyment out of this. If you're someone who doesn't like violent movies, even though this is meant to be a parody of violence, there's still a lot of over-the-top violence in this. So if you have an aversion to that, then you should probably stay away. But other than that, I would recommend it. It gets an 8 out of 10 from me. Definitely holds up to this day, and I think it's worth your time. Following that is The Master. The Master is about a Navy vet who, after the war, is trying to get back into normal society, but is having a really hard time doing that. And given the trauma that he's experienced and the illnesses he is now coping with, he's sort of easy prey for this cult leader. He basically joins by accident at first, but it doesn't take him long to really try to ingratiate himself. And he has a lot of back and forth with the leader. I know that this movie comes highly rated. It didn't really strike a chord for me. This is a movie where the performances really carry it. You got Joaquin Phoenix, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Amy Adams, and they all do a fantastic job. But other than that, it's just boring. It is. This is an average movie for me. It's 5 out of 10. It's exactly in the middle of the road. Next is A Quiet Place Part 2. This was a huge letdown after the first film. I love the first Quiet Place. I thought it was original. I thought it was tense. I thought it was very well written and performed. I thought it was great. This wasn't. The characters kept making bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, to the point where it was hard for me to take anything seriously because I didn't think that this is how people would actually react in these situations. This is one of those movies where the plot only happens because the characters are dumb. So the writers force the characters to just make terrible decisions. Personally, I would rather just watch the first one again. I don't recommend this one. It gets a 4 out of 10 from me. It's not terrible, but it is bad. It's below average. It's not worth your time. Next is The Cell. This is a horror, I guess, movie, thriller, maybe. The premise is that Jennifer Lopez can go inside a person's mind and communicate with them in there. She's going into the minds of unconscious people and trying to communicate with them. She's doing this because this murderer has fallen into a coma, and she needs to be able to communicate with him to find out where his victim is, because this victim hasn't been killed yet. So she has to, find out where she is so she can still save her. In terms of visuals, this was very original for its time. I can definitely see why people who like it do like it. I can also see why some people don't like it. This is definitely not for everybody. I thought it was fine. For me, this gets a 5 out of 10. I recommend it if you haven't seen it, and if you're into trippy visuals, if you're into altered realities. I think this is something you would find interesting. Next is the Netflix original film, I Am Mother. The premise of this is that humanity has been wiped out. Humans, as a species, are trying to be reintroduced to the planet after an extinction level event. We follow this one young girl. She is raised inside this bunker. She has no reason to not believe that she is the only human that exists, because that's what she's been raised to believe her entire life. Lo and behold, that all gets turned on its head when there are humans that exist outside her shelter. And she makes the mistake that, of course, she makes this mistake. She lets one of those humans inside her shelter, which just further destroys her entire worldview, makes her question everything that she's learned her entire life. And we see this struggle between her trying to understand all this new information, the robot who raised her, mother, trying to comfort and console and keep the relationship that she has with this child, and this new woman trying to survive. This is another one where I was really intrigued by the premise. It sounded interesting, and it ended up being average for me. So it's right in the middle of the road. This is a 5 out of 10. Not bad. Worth your time if you haven't seen it. I would recommend it if you're into science fiction, if you're into post-apocalyptic things. Worth a watch. Not worth a second watch. After that is Living with Yourself. Netflix original series starring Paul Rudd, about this guy who is dissatisfied with his life. He ends up going to the spa that his colleague recommends to him because he noticed how his colleague has really been stepping up recently. So his colleague tells him, it's like, yeah, there's this spa, go there. You'll start feeling better about life, and you'll start doing better at everything. Minor spoilers right now, but this is the premise of the show. So turns out this spa clones you and then kills you. But the original Paul Rudd didn't die. So now he and his clone are just trying to navigate how complex life has become now that they know that that's the situation that they're in. It's interesting. It raises some good philosophical questions. It's entertaining. Paul Rudd is always enjoyable. I like him a lot. This ended up getting a 7 out of 10 from me. It is solidly above average for me, so 7 out of 10. After that comes Space Jam: A New Legacy. I'm not going to say too much about this. I've posted a full review of this movie. I'll post a link in the description box below. Long story short, I didn't like it. 2 out of 10. If you want more of my thoughts, like I said, watch the full review. After that, I watched Invincible. This is an Amazon Prime original based on a comic written by Robert Kirkman, who also wrote Walking Dead. And it's about this kid whose dad is essentially Superman. And he knows that at a certain point in his life, he's going to get the same set of powers that his dad has. And he's going to have to learn how to use them and help people. And that's the premise of the show, is this kid coming into his powers and trying to learn how to use them to help people. You also see his struggle of not only learning how to be a hero and how to help people, but also how he can juggle that and the responsibilities that he has as a normal kid, because he's still going to school, still has to, maintain his friendships and other relationships. He's just trying to learn how to balance all of this. And also, this show is very graphic in terms of violence, in terms of gore, so be ready for that when you go into it. This is not a child-friendly cartoon by any means. From me, this gets an 8 out of 10. Very enjoyable. I loved it. I looked up the voice cast. It is absolutely stacked. Just so much talent goes into this show, and you can tell. And I would strongly recommend it, especially if you enjoy superheroes. Next, we have Black Sails. This is a Starz original about pirates. And honestly, it's hard to describe the show more than that. It's a show about pirates. As soon as I say that, you know exactly what to expect. It doesn't really do more than that. It doesn't really go beyond its original premise. It's a show about pirates. It continues for 4 seasons being about pirates, and doesn't really do anything to take that premise in new directions. It's well made. I don't think it's going to really blow anyone away. From me, it gets a 6 out of 10. I'll recommend it if you're really into pirates. If you like pirates, you'll like this. If you don't like pirates, you won't like this. After that, we have Love, Death, and Robots. I finally watched the first and second installments of Netflix original. It's an anthology series where every episode is its own contained story. They're all very unique. More often than not, I found it interesting, I found it entertaining. Some of them are definitely better than others, but that's going to happen with a premise like this. I found it to essentially be a more palatable version of Black Mirror. I love Black Mirror. I think it's excellent. So this was right up my alley. The animation is different almost every episode. The story is different, the characters are different. Everything is different every episode. And that keeps it fresh, that keeps it enjoyable. There's something in it for every genre of sci-fi. So I would strongly recommend it, especially if you like sci-fi, regardless of what subgenre you fall in. If you like robots, if you like post-apocalypse, if you like fantastical sci-fi, if you like aliens, regardless of what kind of sci-fi you like, you will find something in Love, Death, and Robots to enjoy. From me, it gets an 8 out of 10. After that, we have Synchronic. This is a movie about this drug that people start taking, and there are crazy side effects. Basically, warp reality and make it so things that are impossible have happened to these people. Follow these 2 paramedics who respond to these calls of people who have overdosed on this drug because literally impossible things have been happening to them. Eventually, we learn why. After that, it becomes one of the paramedics trying to use that to help locate a missing person who has taken this drug. For me, this landed very in the middle of the road. I didn't find it great, but I didn't dislike it by any means. So for me, it gets a solid 5 out of 10. I would recommend it if you like altered realities, if you like mind-bending experiences. This is something you will also enjoy. And the last thing I watched this month was March Comes In Like a Lion. This is an anime about a shogi player, and you follow his life. But don't go in thinking that this is an anime about shogi. This is how my friend recommended it to me. Hey, so I know you've really been enjoying that anime about Go. There's this other one I've been watching about a shogi player. It's really good. I think you would like it. This is how I think he should have recommended it to me.
You want to be sad?
Because the shogi is really just a framing device. It's mostly a slice of life following this kid and his day-to-day experiences. It's very well written. It's very emotional, very impactful at times. And he gets really close with this family. And this family, their whole dynamic, is the second cutest thing I've ever seen in anime. The first cutest being the platelets in cells at work. With its writing, with its characters, with its animation, it's so unique and original. I love it. I thought it was a great show. I would strongly recommend it. Give it a 9 out of 10. It is awesome. And now, time to talk about... Again, these are in no particular order. So first, let's talk about Timeline. The version I have is Timeline American History. They make a bunch of different versions. I know there's European history, there's global events. Timeline is a super simple card game where everyone gets a hand of cards, and they're two-sided. On one side is just an event. It'll have a small picture and the name of the event. And on the other side, it's the same thing, only it also shows the year that it happened. What you do on your turn is you take one of your cards, any one of them that you want, and you add it to the timeline that's in the center of the table. And you flip it over to reveal the year that it happened, which you don't know, and no one else is going to know either. And if you're right, then you're great. It stays there. If you're wrong, then it gets discarded and you draw a new card, and you're trying to get rid of all of your cards. So you're trying to just make sure that everything that you place is in its correct place in the timeline. I know this doesn't sound like much, but this has gone over well with everybody I've played it with. Gamers, non-gamers, my family. This is a big hit every time it hits the table. Quick filler game, takes maybe 15 minutes. Also played this month was Settlers of Catan. If you have been playing board games for any amount of time by now, you know the Settlers of Catan. You know probably whether you like it or not. A lot of people have grown out of it, moved away from it, because there are other games who do resource management, who do trading, who do building, crafting, and things like that. And I can understand why some people don't feel like going back to Settlers of Catan, but I'm still a big fan of it. I really enjoy the anticipation in the dice rolls of whether or not you're actually going to harvest anything that you want, being able to trade with other players. It's a classic for a reason. It really is. I wouldn't say this is something you can introduce to anybody, so I completely understand why some people are no longer interested in Settlers of Catan. I am a big fan. I'm almost always down to play this. Also played this month was Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is a role selection game. It has this great mechanic where your actions are determined by the roles that are available. So as soon as someone picks one, everyone gets to do that action, but whoever picked that specific person gets like an additional little bonus. For example, there's one role you can select where it lets you get colonists who will help you run your farms and run your buildings. And when you pick them, everyone gets to get a number of colonists, but you always get a bonus one because you're the one who picked that role. I know that there are some people who have played Puerto Rico to death. They have it down to a science where they know exactly which role to pick and exactly when to pick it in all situations. And if they still have fun doing that, great for them. My group, we've only played this a couple of times. We are very far from that, and I still really enjoy this game. So that is Puerto Rico. Another game that hit the table this month, Marrakesh. Marrakesh is a game where you roll a die, move a guy, place a rug, and that's it. A very simple concept. The effort that went into the components of this game, the rugs are actual small rugs made of cloth. And just the detail that they put onto even the D6 that comes with the game, the level of detail in that, it's just such a good looking game, and it's always fun, super easy to learn. I'm confident I could teach this game to anybody in 5 minutes, and they would understand it completely. They would have a good time playing it. Marrakesh has always gone over well with my game group. Always fun, Marrakesh. And after that comes Yinch. It's a very simple concept. You're trying to arrange your pieces in rows of 5. But as soon as you do that, you remove one of your permanent pieces from the board. So you're making yourself weaker. You're closer to victory, but it's going to be more difficult now because you don't have that piece. And the first person who can make rows of 5 3 times is the winner. And conceptually, it is. But the actual planning and forethought that you have to put into making those rows of 5 gives this a surprising amount of depth. This is absolutely one of my favorite abstract strategy games, and I strongly recommend it if you like that style of game. And for me, the final game played this month was Divan. Divan is another game in the Gift Project. It's game number 4. And again, it's another abstract strategy game. And this one is so much more intense than Yinch is, because as soon as you start with a board completely full, and you have to move very carefully if you want to score properly. But you also don't want to move too much, because if you do, you'll make it more difficult for yourself to make any turns later. So you really want to be creative with how you're moving around. And again, that creativity comes from a very simple moveset. And again, it's a 2-player abstract strategy game. So that was the month in review for this past July. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like the video, leave a comment letting me know what you think of anything that's been discussed in this video, and subscribe if you haven't already.